Hello, it's James coming to you today from my office here in the midst of the Christian season of Lent, which is a season of preparation that leads us toward Easter. It's 40 days, and since it's 40 days, it was chosen, 40 days were chosen as a way of remembering Jesus 40 days in the wilderness. And so we do this preparation. Oftentimes it includes fasting and other kinds of disciplines we add to our lives or take away from our lives that allow us to be more focused and prepare for Easter in our hearts, prepare our lives for it. As we come to this space today, I just want to remind you, you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved for the gift you already are. Now, some of you who listen to me believe me when I say that, and some of you do not. But I want you to hear it and know that I mean it when I say it. I want you to also know that I struggle sometimes to hear that message myself, even though it's the message I know is true to the good news that I was sent to bring. So today I wanted to take a moment in the midst of Lent. I talked this past Sunday a bit about grief. And I mentioned one of the ways that we can help to move through our time of grief is through ritual. And I've talked about ritual before. I've talked about grief before. But today I thought I might give you some specific suggestions, some of which I've tried and some of which occurred to me this morning while I was sitting and preparing for this time. So the first I already mentioned, but I will mention to you again, involves lighting a candle. I do that because for me, lighting a candle reminds me of various things in my life. It depends on A candle can be symbolic in lots of ways, and the ritual of lighting this candle. For instance, right now, for me, this ritual candle is simply a reminder that this space between us now, whether you're coming to me live or whether you're watching this as a recording later on, that this space between us is sacred. Now, this candle doesn't make it sacred any more than it was sacred before. It is simply a recognition of what was already true. This lighting of the candle reminds me, when I look at it, don't forget, this space between us right now is sacred space. And just in case I forget, I've got that candle to remind me. So in a grief kind of ritual, that might be appropriate, might be a way, in a grief kind of ritual, you are already missing that person in whatever way that they're gone, whether they have died, whether your relationship has ended. Perhaps you're grieving the loss of a pet or a friend. Perhaps you're grieving the change in seasons. You love winter and it's going to be spring soon and you're grieving the loss of the seasons. Perhaps you've just lost your job. Someone has said for one reason or another that the meaning you got from doing that particular thing was no longer necessary. And so you're feeling a loss of meaning. You can feel a loss of a lot of things and grieve those losses. We all grieve differently. We all deal with that grief in different kinds of ways. But for instance, if it's a person that you're remembering and missing, light a candle. I lighted that candle to recognize this sacred space. Well, perhaps with your dinner, I suggested that in the message on Sunday morning, but perhaps with your dinner, when you sit down, you light that candle as a reminder that of someone who used to share dinner with you, or someone that matters. Perhaps you make a specific time in the day when you light a candle, or when you think about it during the day, you might light that candle as a way of saying, I remember. There's nothing to stop you from speaking out loud to the person who's gone, saying whatever is on your heart or mind. I'll be honest with you. I don't know the receptivity of a person who has stepped into the next realm. I don't know whether they hear us or not, but I kind of suspect they do and can. And so the things I need to say, I'm unafraid to say. I told you once before that one of my rituals periodically is to talk to my paternal and maternal grandfathers. Dawes was one that I met briefly, and he died when I was very young. And one that died when my mom was 12 and was a Methodist preacher like me, I guess. And so I call Dawes, who is the one I briefly knew, and Papa Eddie. His name was Edward, my middle name. Papa Eddie, I talk to them sometimes out loud. Now, these are people I didn't know. I am also given to talking out loud to a friend I lost about 8 years ago, Michael. I talk to Michael out loud, and I sometimes talk to Thomas out loud. Thomas, a good friend. I talk to Thomas on a monthly basis up until November of 2022. And then he died in December of 2022. And his service and memorial, his celebration of his life, was in January of 2023. And so it's still fresh, but we had regular conversations. And so I remember. You know, first responders have a way of remembering the passing of a comrade, of a colleague, and even across services sometimes. So between the fire department and the police department, there may be a black band that they put around their their badge to remember. There's nothing to stop you from putting a black band or some remembrance like that over the picture of a person that you have in your house, or a piece of ribbon that you lay across it that's black, that's a reminder. And it just helps you to remember, to say, I honor your memory. Perhaps one of the things that you do is to write down the stories of the ways in which that relationship, that person mattered to you. So you journal about it. You write, when you think of a story of that person, you write it down for yourself so that you can remember, so that you can, as you write it down and as you see it on the page, you might internalize it. And while it might bring pain, it might also bring some kind of catharsis, some kind of relief as you write about it and remember in an honoring way that person. Perhaps you have anger towards that person because they're gone and you just, you weren't expecting it and you're not happy about it. So you feel anger. You can express that anger in your writing too. You can say it out loud to yourself, perhaps in the quiet of a room somewhere. Other rituals, you could gather together some of the pictures you may have of the person, and you may put them together in kind of a display in your house somewhere, a little memorial space where you can go and take a look at the person. Maybe you make time every day to give thanks for them. And maybe your ritual is just to say thank you that so-and-so. For me, it might be thank you that Thomas was in my life for all of our great conversations. I'm thankful and I honor that memory because it made a difference to me. Or maybe I do the same thing. Thank you for the gift of Michael in my life. Michael, who was always so insightful and wicked smart, and with whom I could bounce any idea that I wanted. And he often would tell me if I had crossed some, that's a little over the edge, Michael might say to me. He would say it in such a kind way, though, in such a gentle way. And those voices that spoke into my life, Thomas's and Michael's, are missed. And so I honor their memory. Perhaps this candle that notes the sacred space for us today also notes my memory of Michael and Thomas. You can do any of these ways of remember, perhaps eating their favorite food sometime as a way of remembering them, even if it wasn't your favorite food. Perhaps you serve yourself or go out to that favorite restaurant, as hard as it may be, and you sit at the table and you order something that they would have. Um, you have to determine the relationship. Order something that they would never have ordered and would have given you a hard time for ordering, and think about the hard time they would have given you. Perhaps find some laughter in the midst of your grief, because that's also a way to recover. Uh, a last thing I'll say is, many of you have noted over the years of my leadership at St. James, I switched sometime in the early 20 teens from wearing more colorful attire when I led worship and worked, still having the St. James logo on it, that I switched over and started wearing black. My switching over to starting wearing black really began when I started a more contemplative kind of practice in my life, meditation and the like. And the blackness was a way of remembering the sadness, the heaviness that I was beginning to sense as I sat with God in silence every day. And so I wear black as a way of just sort of noting my grief, noting my sense of the shadows in our world, not in a racial way, but in a absence of light kind of way, darkness versus light. And so it is. What way do you think you might get through? And there's no reason you can't try a ritual if you want to. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't feel like it's giving you any release, try something else. You're not bound to anything that you set up. I just encourage you to try, because it's a way to deal with the losses you face, whether it's the loss of meaning in changing jobs, the loss of sense of well-being, the loss of a sense of decorum, as people in the world spend more time shouting at each other than listening to each other and trying to outshout the other. And you wonder, was there ever a time? There probably wasn't really, but was there ever a time when we could speak in a more genteel and a more honoring way to each other? How can we honor each other's voices? Maybe you just feel that heaviness. Feel the heaviness of the wars in the world, the death of innocence, the death of anyone. Any of those things can be worthy of your grief if you are feeling grief because of them. So, if this helps you, I think that's great. If it doesn't help you, perhaps something else I will say in the future, or something else you've read will. In any case, I really do thank you for joining me today as our time of sacred space together comes to an end. I'll blow out our candle. Thankful for the time that we've had, and remind you once again, you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved for the gift you already are. Go in peace, my friends. So it is. What way do you think you might get through? And there's no reason you can't try a ritual if you want to. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't feel like it's giving you any release, try something else. You're not bound to anything that you set up.